Do you ever look at your food photos and wonder, how do I get these to look sharper? Well, if you think you need a better camera or a new lens, want to save you some money, I want you to try troubleshooting a few things with me first. I'm Joni Simon, food photographer and educator, and last week we talked about a couple of topics, including focus and shutter speed, as some of the great places to start if you are struggling with images that don't feel sharp. But I left you on a cliffhanger saying that there was one other big concept, one area that really has such a huge impact on the perceived sharpness and clarity of your images, and that is your lighting. Don't believe me? Well, check out these photos. One was captured with my full frame mirrorless Nikon Z7 camera and the 24-70 f2.8 S lens. S is a distinction for their kind of more premium glass quality. That whole entire setup is approximately around $5,500 in equipment. And then the other photo is captured with the Canon Rebel T2i with the 18 to 55 millimeter kit lens that came with the camera. I purchased this whole setup for $200 used. Maybe if you really got in there and did some pixel peeping, you could spot the difference. But both are sharp and crisp, look equally great, especially if you consider that much of the work that I do and that a lot of us do these days is then posted to social media and websites where it's compressed. So what is this lighting secret that helps even images coming out of an entry-level camera with a kit lens look sharp? Well, instead of telling you, I'd like to show you. Whenever I think about lighting, my goal is always to create a clean lighting scenario. That I love to embrace the idea that less is more when it comes to the light that's entering your scene. So what do I mean by clean lighting? Well, I think of it like pruning a tree. If you've ever pruned a tree or you're familiar with that practice, it's where you're cutting off the dead branches, cutting off the excess to help bolster the overall strength of the tree and increase the productivity and flowering. So for example, you can see here, I have one artificial light setup lighting my scene, and then I also have the overhead room lights on, and then I also have a window nearby with some natural light streaming in. So if I take a test shot of this scene, what we see are multiple shadows cast, and there's an overall sense of muddiness to this image. It doesn't feel sharp. So this is a moment when simplifying or pruning the lighting will help increase the perceived quality of the image. Let me show you. Let me turn off the overhead lights in the room and take another shot. So now we can see that has eliminated one of the additional shadows that was being cast. And also the color looks more vibrant and accurate. Why is that? Well, for one, because the overhead lights in the room are a warmer color temperature compared to the light coming from the window and the light coming from my artificial light. All lights present a different color temperature ranging from blue to orange, with then white daylight being right in the middle. On the specs listed for this light, it is listed as daylight balanced. And so by removing the overhead lights, which have that warmer color temperature, I'm cleaning up the color in the scene, simplifying it, pruning out that unnecessary color in order to improve the overall quality of the image in terms of the color. But we're gonna keep pruning because we're still not totally there in terms of crisp and sharp. There's a little bit of muddiness still. So next what I'm gonna do is I am gonna cover the window and eliminate the natural light entering the scene and then take another shot. And so what do we see? We see that we have an image that overall feels more crisp and clean. We have further pruned that lighting by removing that additional source. So why does that work? Why does that look better? Because now we only have light coming in from one direction. This allows depth to be more accurately interpreted by our brains. Because how do we know something is three-dimensional from looking at it? When we see there are light sides and there are shadow sides. Like this cube, for example. If all the sides are the same value in terms of the color gray, it looks flat. But when we add a dark side and a light side and a middle value side, it appears three-dimensional, even though this is a flat two-dimensional screen. So when you add an extra light to your food photography scene, brightening up the shadow areas, you create a scenario much like the flat cube. All the values are equal, so the brain brain can't interpret the depth. But if you simplify and prune the lighting to come from one primary direction, you strengthen the effectiveness of the main light. It creates the opportunity for contrast in the image because there are now bright areas and shadow areas. You're getting a variety of tones present in the image, much like the three-dimensional cube. So if your lighting is feeling flat or muddy or less than sharp, I recommend pruning down to one light source. Now, certainly when it comes to photographic lighting, we do have additional light sources such as fill lights or using a bounce card to fill in the shadow areas. But I recommend you do that with caution. Be careful. You don't want to overlight your fill light, create so much fill light that you create that flat feeling. You still need some shadows to create that sense of depth and sharpness and clarity. Now, what if you're in an environment like a restaurant where you can't cover the windows or turn off the overhead lights? Then you might want to consider getting into flash, because with flash, you have an extra level of control for creating cleaner lighting. Flash gives you the ability to control the brightness of the flash separately from other continuous light sources in the room. This is the principle of flash, utilizing two separate exposures, one for each type of light, flash versus continuous. So because of this, you can eliminate unwanted extra light sources called ambient light. And so as a result of that, you can create really clean lighting with flash. This is why when I go to a restaurant, I always bring a flash, because I can completely black out all of the orangey overhead lights with my camera settings. You might have also heard me refer to this as canceling out the ambient light. And that's exactly what I did here in this image. I was in the middle of a restaurant dining room with orangey overhead lights. I just canceled them all out and relied on the light from my flash. Now, I do remember the first time somebody told me about flash and I was completely overwhelmed. I was pretty sure that that was going to require a degree in astrophysics to fully understand. But I promise the way that I teach the two exposures and how flash works inside of Artificial Academy is completely learnable. I have figured out a way to simplify it and break it down so that it's easy and then it's fun. And then a whole new world of opportunity opens up to you to do your food photography absolutely anywhere. Now, the other superpower of flash for getting sharper, crisper images is that flash is more effective at freezing action, freezing a moment. Like we talked about in the last video, traditionally we rely on the camera's shutter speed to freeze action in photography. Well, with flash, it's the speed of the light, the speed of the flash that freezes the action. For example, this flash here is firing at 1/8,000th of a second. That is completely fast enough to freeze water being poured in splash shots like here with this coffee and this creamer. And it's definitely fast enough to eliminate all potential for camera shake from your shutter speed. So with flash, you can shoot handheld and not worry about camera blur. And certainly if the concept of flash duration and some of this feels a little mind melting and you're not sure where to start, inside of Artificial Academy, I break it all down, and literally nothing makes me happier than to see people understanding what are fairly difficult and complex photography concepts, but I make them easy and understandable. Again, you're gonna have so much fun with this. It's gonna unlock all sorts of potential. And absolutely, you're gonna end up with crisper, cleaner, sharper shots. And my sincere hope is as you tackle all of these skills and concepts is that you fall in love with food photography and that you love the camera that you have, that you don't feel like you need to go buy new gear, because like the motto of many photographers, it's not the cameras that takes the pictures, it's the photographer. If I can save you from some unnecessary spending, upgrading a camera that doesn't need upgrading, that is the biggest win in my book. So thanks so much for stopping by the studio. I hope you have a fantastic day. Stay out of trouble and I'll see you soon, all right? Bye.